In the early 1830s, Mexico was a young nation struggling to survive. Although it had won independence from Spain in 1821 after more than a decade of revolution and armed conflict, freedom did not bring stability. Mexico emerged from war exhausted, broke, and deeply divided. When we look at a map of Mexico during this period, we see a country far larger than the one we know today, stretching across nearly 4.5 million square kilometers, making it one of the largest nations in the world at the time. But size did not equal strength. The revolutionaries who defeated Spain had no clear plan for governing. No stable political system was established, and power struggles erupted almost immediately. Governments rose and fell rapidly, military coups became common, and the nation lacked the money needed to administer its vast territory. Mexico faced internal rebellions, economic collapse, and even the threat of renewed Spanish invasion from nearby Cuba. By the time war with the United States approached, the Mexican state was unstable and dangerously unprepared for an international conflict. The rise of an expanding United States. While Mexico struggled, the United States was growing stronger. After gaining independence, the U.S. expanded aggressively westward, pushing deep into Native American territories and purchasing the massive Louisiana Territory from France. By the 1840s, the United States had become a confident, expansionist power driven by the belief that it was destined to spread across the continent. Mexico's weakness presented an opportunity. Several regions rebelled against Mexican rule, most notably Texas, which declared independence in 1836. Initially, the United States refused to annex Texas, largely because northern politicians opposed adding another slave state to the Union. Mexico, however, never recognized Texas as independent. Border raids continued, and Mexican leaders warned that annexation would mean war. Everything changed after the election of James K. Polk in 1844. Polk campaigned on expansion, promising to annex Texas, reclaim Oregon, and acquire California and New Mexico. He first attempted diplomacy, offering to purchase these territories from Mexico. When Mexico refused, Polk chose confrontation. U.S. troops were sent into the disputed region between the Nueces River and the Rio Grande, land both nations claimed. Tensions escalated rapidly. On December 29, 1845, Texas officially became the 28th U.S. state, along with its unresolved border dispute. War was now almost inevitable. The spark that ignited the war. On April 25, 1846, Mexican cavalry attacked an American patrol in the disputed zone, killing several U.S. soldiers. Soon after, Mexican forces laid siege to an American fort along the Rio Grande. General Zachary Taylor called for reinforcements and defeated Mexican troops at the battles of Palo Alto and Resaca de la Palma. President Polk addressed Congress, declaring that American blood had been shed on American soil. On May 13, 1846, the United States officially declared war. Mexico never issued a formal declaration, but the war had begun. Later, Ulysses S. Grant, who served as a young officer, would argue that the U.S. deliberately provoked the conflict by advancing into disputed territory, knowing Mexico would respond militarily. Santa Anna returns. Mexico's internal chaos deepened. At the center of it stood Antonio López de Santa Anna, a deeply controversial figure who had supported, and betrayed, nearly every political system Mexico had tried. Over 2 decades, he would serve 12 non-consecutive terms as president. When war broke out, political factions removed President Mariano Paredes and invited Santa Anna to return from exile in Cuba to lead the nation. Unknown to Mexico's leaders, Santa Anna had secretly negotiated with U.S. officials, offering to sell disputed territories in exchange for safe passage home. Once back in power, however, he betrayed that promise and prepared to fight. The war expands west. American forces quickly moved into Mexican-held territories. U.S. troops entered New Mexico without resistance and claimed Santa Fe in August 1846. A temporary government was established, and American control was secured. In California, U.S. naval forces seized coastal cities, while settlers and volunteers supported the takeover. By early 1847, organized Mexican resistance in California had ended. Despite occasional revolts, American control over the Southwest solidified rapidly. Battles in northern Mexico. Meanwhile, General Zachary Taylor advanced south with just over 2,000 troops. The brutal Battle of Monterrey exposed American weaknesses in urban warfare, but Taylor eventually forced a Mexican withdrawal. Santa Anna personally marched north with over 15,000 soldiers to crush Taylor at Buena Vista in February 1847. Despite overwhelming numbers, Mexican attacks failed due to American artillery and battlefield positioning. Just when victory seemed possible, Santa Anna withdrew, called back by political upheaval in Mexico City. Many historians believe the U.S. Army narrowly avoided destruction, the invasion of Mexico's heartland. Rather than reinforce Taylor, the U.S. launched a second invasion. General Winfield Scott led a new army by sea, landing at Veracruz in March 1847, the first major amphibious assault in U.S. history. After capturing Veracruz, Scott marched inland toward Mexico City. Despite guerrilla resistance and fierce fighting at Cerro Gordo, Contreras, Cherubusco, Molino del Rey, and Chapultepec, American forces pushed forward. In September 1847, U.S. troops entered Mexico City itself. The capital fell. The cost of defeat. Mexican soldiers were exhausted, poorly equipped, unpaid, and often starving. Many were peasants with loyalty to their villages, not the generals who conscripted them. Desertion was rampant. With its capital occupied, Mexico had no choice but to negotiate. The treaty that changed North America. In 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ended the war. Mexico ceded Texas, California, and New Mexico, along with vast additional lands, over 900,000 square miles, to the United States. In return, Mexico received $15 million, far less than what the U.S. had previously offered. Later, the Gadsden Purchase finalized the modern border between the two nations. Conclusion. The Mexican-American War reshaped North America forever. It was not just a clash of armies, but a collision between a nation weakened by instability and another driven by expansion. The consequences would echo through history, setting the stage for future conflicts, divisions, and the rise of the United States as a continental power.